Hello and welcome to the Tracy Sandler Show. I am your host, Tracy Sandler, and I am so excited to welcome back friend of the show. I would almost say family of the show because you come on a
Thank
lot
you.
and I love our time together. So I'm going to say family of the show, Matt Sims, co-host of the Sims Complete podcast, all around amazing human being, hell of a football analyst, and Michigan apologist. Not really, but he puts up with me.
I was waiting for it. I was like, there has to be some sort of negative coming with all of my takes on Michigan this past year, and just me being the us versus everybody. I was a part of the everybody crew. Yeah.
You were wrong though, so I can live with it.
Yeah, and
You
you know
were
what?
wrong.
I don't give a damn. If I had to do it 10 times over, I'd still do it. Because hey, why not? I gotta just tease Michigan when I can. Just to get under your skin too every now and then.
But they just kept winning, so it was like, okay, we loved it.
Yeah.
You could be the everybody, and I'm Michigan, and
Damn it.
I didn't prep you for this because we're going to talk 49ers. However, I realize I have to bring up
Yeah.
that my man, my JJ McCarthy, went
Yo,
exactly
man.
where I wanted him to go. My JJ.
Yeah.
I'm gonna call him because I love JJ.
Of course.
He went to the Vikings, which is where I wanted him to go, which is apparently where JJ wanted himself to go for Jim Harbaugh. I think it's the perfect position for him, perfect place for him. Top 10
Definitely.
pick. Honestly, couldn't be prouder. And may I also say, you are now talking to the world's biggest Vikings fan, Soul.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
If you guys missed it, please go to my Instagram because I did a full-on video doing that.
Oh, you did? Yeah. I know. We got to get Tracy out there, whatever, like banging that drum and, whatever with the Viking horn that they do for pregame show to get the whole Skull family ready to go. I would like that. But
as a lifelong Vikings fan of 5 days, it would be an honor.
It's a good time to be a Vikings fan. And, hey, I know that we tease about Michigan and all that stuff with me personally, between us with that banter and all that, but just excited for JJ. You're absolutely right. It's a great spot. You don't have to do one of those, but
for those of you listening, I just look like a proud parent right now.
It's like, keep going. But I am excited for him. If he was my student, my son, a former player, all that stuff, like to go and be a Minnesota Viking with O'Connell, that offense, with the skill group that they have surrounding him, with just the way that the franchise is situated right now, he's in a really good place. And, maybe he plays right away. Maybe he doesn't. You have Sam Darnold there, who has been through just about every experience of the highs and lows of the NFL. And I think all of those are positives for a young JJ McCarthy to go in there and do what he needs to do and adapt to this NFL world, I think faster than what, most people will be aware of because of just his background with Harbaugh and what he's experienced at Michigan with the demands of being, big Blues quarterback.
You bring up my other favorite lifelong fan team, of course, the Chargers. I've been a fan of them for at least a couple months now and bolt up. I can't take on every team. I'm going to root for the Commanders because I love Adam Peters and we always had a great working relationship when he was the Niners.
Right.
And then he took my other favorite Michigan player, Mikey Sainristil. So
yeah,
I will root for the Commanders, but in terms of actually like taking on teams, I really can't take on more than two. So you mentioned my other one. I don't know if you saw Jim sing "Hail to the Victors" after he drafted Junior Colson, but
I did.
That was just epic. So at least it's not just me.
And that was one of my favorite picks too of the draft, is him getting Junior Colson, because I was a huge fan of that player, his story, what he's come from, and really just that's just the epitome of the NFL right there. It really is, and just like what it does for these young men. And I just enjoyed watching him play too in the semifinal and in the national championship when we were there, down there in Texas, to see just the toughness, playing through the injury, playing with the club, being a leader of that defense. So Junior Colson going back with his homie and Jim Harbaugh, very excited for those two to kind of rekindle that relationship. And Junior will be a huge impact player to kind of letting the veterans know this is what we should expect from Harbaugh on a day-to-day basis, which I think is interesting. And wouldn't be shocked if he's someone that's calling the defense early on, sooner rather than later, that's usually typical for rookies at that position.
It will be probably helpful to have someone say this is what you can expect from Harbaugh,
Yeah.
because I think the beauty of Jim Harbaugh is you never know what to expect on a day-to-day basis, and maybe Junior Colson can just share that.
He could do his absolute best, but you're going to get enthusiasm. You're going to get some passion for the game, and a guy that enjoys just the grind of getting better at football, whether it's being a motivator or evaluating or coaching talent. So all good things for all those parties included. So good year for Michigan, and it just keeps getting better.
Go blue, bolt up, and skull. And with that, we will switch to the 49ers with an enthusiasm unknown to mankind. Right. So that is our saying goodbye to my good friend Jim. As I said, bolt up. And we are going to talk 49ers draft. So it's interesting. I've seen all these takes, mainly from fans. And I think the reality is this team was just in the Super Bowl. And I've said this a couple of times. I said this on the radio the other day. If they had skipped free agency and skipped the draft and did absolutely nothing to their roster, they were still a competitive football team because they were just in the Super Bowl. There were issues. They almost didn't make the Super Bowl because of some of those issues. But at the end of the day, if they did nothing, they were still in a good spot. That being said, free agency, I think they did a lot. And I know we've talked about this, to retool their special teams, retool the defensive line. And so the draft became a lot about adding some versatility, adding depth, and planning for the future. And John Lynch said that last Monday in his pre-draft press conference with us. He said, we're not just drafting for 2024. We're drafting beyond 2024. And I think that was apparent. And we'll start with the wide receiver position. And obviously there was a lot of talk and a lot of reports, and they're going to trade Brandon Ayuk, and they're going to trade Deebo Samuel, and they traded no one, which I could have told you was what was going to happen. But I just didn't think they were going to get an offer that was going to blow them away. I never thought Ayuk was getting traded under any circumstances, to be perfectly honest with you, that the only one that had potential is Deebo Samuel, but they want to get back to a Super Bowl. If they trade Deebo Samuel, they're paying him almost as much not to be on the team than to be on the team. And we can talk about later what could change. We get close to the trade deadline. But at the end of the day, if you get rid of either of them, you're worse. No matter who you replace them with, right this year, you're worse than you were the year before. So I think it all kind of worked out as it should have. But they do go receiver with their first pick in the draft with Ricky Pearsall. They end up getting a receiver again later with Jacob Cowing. But let's start with Pearsall, who I think was a very surprise pick to a lot of people. But when you look at the tape and you look at what he's able to do, it makes a lot of sense. I mentioned versatility. He's very versatile. He could be a punt returner, which is a position they are looking for. And that was very clear with a number of the guys that they took in this draft. So great player. I think he will contribute, but what do you see when you look at Pearsall?
Yeah, I think Pearsall is a very good football player. And I think this is another guy that kind of you can add to the Lynch Shanahan just draft tree of finding a player that maybe isn't valued in the eyes of maybe the rest of the league. Very similar to how they viewed Brandon Ayuk, how they viewed Deebo Samuel, and yet they have found the most creative ways possible to make them household names, right, across the NFL, to make them someone that is actually interested in potentially in a trade, whereas I don't think a lot of teams would get the most out of a guy like a Brandon Ayuk or a Deebo Samuel, and then halfway through that, after that trade would take place, they'd be like, all right, let's just do what they did with him in San Francisco, because that was how we get the best out of him. So, I think again, for Pearsall, they found a niche football player that can plug in and play right away for them in the slot position. Wouldn't be shocked if they have packages where he lines up in the backfield with Christian McCaffrey and doing multiple sets that way and using him as another Swiss Army knife like a Deebo Samuel, getting him multiple carries, multiple touches. The punt returning, like you said, the route running is superb. The toughness is really the other part that I think people are missing out on, that I think Kyle and Lynch really do value at a very high level, more so than others. They want a guy like Pearsall to go with that Deebo, Brandon Ayuk attitude. You got to block it to get the rock, and the same thing for this guy. I think that he is going to enjoy getting his hands dirty and being a tough football player on the offensive side of the football. I'm very excited for this pick. Is he a little high in most mock drafts? Yes, possibly. But I do think that he will be able to make an immediate impact in this offense. The way that they're changing the offense with Brock Purdy as the quarterback, a little bit more spread out, running these more quick hitter routes, option routes, in cuts over the middle, the seam passes, stuff like that. Those are things that I think he will be able to, translate to the NFL level very, very quickly and be someone that can really participate in this offense growing from where it is right now.
And one thing I've said to fans who were like, well, he would have been there at such a time. You have no idea where he'd be. And when you look at the beginning of the second round, there was a run of receivers. And so I don't think he would have been there. This was the same thing last year with Jake Moody. Like, he would have been there, blah, blah, blah. Where right after him, 2 kickers were picked, or 2 picks later, and the 49ers would have missed him. So the reality is, like, the mock drafts are great, and it's lots to analyze and talk about as we head to the draft. But once it starts, it starts. Yeah. And if your guy's there when you're picking, Pearsall wasn't going to be there at 63. So that
and you want to be on the side of starting the trend of the run of receivers, not reacting to it. And I think that's what the San Francisco 49ers did. They didn't wait for the run of receivers and then say, damn, Ricky was just picked by the Raiders. They said, no, our guy is there. We like him. We've seen enough from him. He's been extremely productive at Florida, which has been a so-so offense in college. I mean, if he was at some of these other schools, who knows? This guy might have been valued at a little bit higher rate if he played for like an LSU with that type of offense that they were running. So they started the trend with getting some of these receivers that were kind of in that second tier-ish mode. They found the guy that they wanted, a guy that can do a little bit of everything. And you're right. The added benefit of the special teams depth for them, it's just one less thing to think about that really ends up being one of the most crucial parts of the game and of your season too. When you have just like a really strong, tough, dependable dude back there catching punts, doing kickoff returns every now and then. And then again, the Swiss Army knife aspect of him on the offensive side of the football, being very versatile and getting a lot out of a young player early on with his physicality too and his attitude, because that's something that's very apparent when you watch him on film.
Absolutely. And you bring up the toughness, the physicality, the attitude, and that is a very specific thing. And not everybody fits in this offense. Maybe your best, and this is not, I'm not naming anybody at all. I don't mean it that way. But you can look at any draft and maybe the guy considered the best wide receiver in the draft doesn't fit in your offense and doesn't fit in your mindset. And there is a level of unselfishness that they need in the guys that they bring into this offense, because you're not going to get the ball a million times a game. That's just not how this offense is designed. You need to be able to block. You need to be okay blocking. I mean, George Kittle is one of the great examples of this. You have weeks with him not being targeted very often, but he's integral to the blocking game, and the offense wouldn't work without him. And I think there is a certain mindset and attitude that you have to take into account when you're drafting guys.
It is. And another thing to add to that, because you make a great point there, and even to just go further into the weeds as far as how Kyle Shanahan thinks about that position, being a former receiver himself, every receiver that he gets, there's never like, he's a so-so catcher of the football and needs to improve on that at the next level. No, that was never the issue. Debo's a great catcher of the football. Christian McCaffrey's a great catcher of the football. Brandon Ayuk is a great catcher of the football. And Ricky Pearsall is also a great catcher of the football. Very natural. It's not one of those things where like, hopefully, with more reps in the NFL, he'll get better at catching the football. It'll be more natural to him. It's like, no, these guys are automatic when the ball is thrown to them. They make a lot of tough contested catches, and they do a lot of different routes and can really be used in a lot of ways. So that's where I think Kyle really valued this player at an extremely high rate compared maybe to what others had viewed him at.
And then when we talk about, or I guess I talked about, and now I'm going to make you talk about planning for the future.
Yeah.
Next year, they probably are going to have to make some tough decisions. They may not. I do think if they want to, they can pay everybody, but they're going to pay Brock, and they have a top-heavy roster. There's a lot of decisions that are going to need to be made. They're not going to be able to keep everybody. Yeah. So I do think there's a benefit also of drafting the replacement now and having him come in as a rookie, especially a rookie who can contribute and who will play, and as opposed to drafting someone next year that now has to come in and potentially replace someone. I think the other thing it does as we go to the season and we look at the trade deadline, which of course it's looking ahead because the season hasn't even started yet, but inevitably there'll be a need that they don't realize they need. Somebody might get injured. It's football. And so if you have a guy that, let's say something does happen to the trade deadline, and you have Deebo Samuel, who you may trade next year. You have Jawan Jennings, who's going to be an unrestricted free agent next year, who's very attractive to a lot of teams. I would think there would be more of a chance of trading Deebo over Jawan at that point. But either way, if you really need something, you now have the depth and potential to be able to go get what you need.
For sure.
If you have to make a decision at that point in the season.
Yeah, absolutely. There's going to be a lot of question marks, I think, that come up with this offense in the next 2 to 3 years. It's going to have to change, and it's going to have to adapt to a little bit too. I mean, what happens to George Kittle here in the next few years? You know, what happens to his production? Where does he fit into just kind of like this new look offense that's kind of getting away from that standard, just like pound the football, win to the line of scrimmage, getting a little bit more spread out, a little bit more open and free this way because of what their quarterback does best, you know, and spreading the football off and seeing the field a little bit better from the shotgun position, where in the past, Kyle's a little bit more of an under center type of style quarterback, but now he's adjusting with his quarterback. I also wouldn't be shocked too if they approach Brock in the near future too with kind of like a team friendly type of aspect to the deal, saying, hey, like, we're not going to reset the quarterback market with you, but we're going to make sure that we pay you what you're deserving and what you've earned, of course, because you deserve that and you've earned that, but also making sure that, you know, we can keep the integrity of the football team built around you to make sure that we still are competing at a very high level, you know, because the facts are is that Brock Purdy, as good as he is not a Patrick Mahomes where he can overcome shipping off some of the best skill players that they have and still making a Super Bowl run. You know, huge fan of Brock, but it's just like the fact is that he really does need some of those intricate pieces around him so he can be the best point guard possible, you know, and then be able to play free in this offense. So we'll see kind of what their strategy is for that. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting few years. And you're right. They're taking the first steps right now in this past draft and making sure that they secure their future. And it's not just bogging them down, maybe like kind of like the Trey Lance situation did for a few years.
Oh, yes, sure did. This was the first, actually, that was kind of a mess, huh? This was the.
Oh, yeah, that.
No, Trey Lance, forgot about it.
Yeah.
So oddly enough, all those quarterbacks who got traded, and of that class, Trey Lance, they got the most for Trey Lance of any of those teams.
That's right.
Did a terrible job of saying that, but I think you know where I was going.
I know exactly what you mean. I think everyone else knows too. And it turns out that class of quarterbacks, you know, whether it's coaching, whatever, it hasn't lived up to expectations quite yet. And you just hope that it does work out for those young men in their future.
You definitely do. And well, Justin Fields, whenever he gets on the field, is going to have Roman Wilson. So his career is made, and he should say thank you.
That is the last Michigan reference, I swear. All right.
Oh, come on. We're so early in this podcast.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, I had to. I mean, if there's an opportunity, it's not like I can turn it down. That's great.
Yeah, that's right.
Am I savage? No. Let's talk about the other wide receiver they took. And this one, I think he's going to have a little bit more of an uphill battle to make this team. Jacob Cowing, true slot receiver. Another guy that has punt return experience. However, the numbers aren't exactly life-changing, so to speak, but I think it gives a little bit more depth in camp. It's a little bit more of kind of taking a chance. The thing with this draft too, as differed from other drafts, so to speak, is with NIL in the COVID year, it just really changed those much later rounds. So finding a gem in that sixth and seventh rounds is not going to be maybe as prevalent as it was in the past. I'm not saying everybody does seventh round gems like the 49ers, but there was more possibility for it. So I feel like Jacob Cowing, where he was taken maybe in a different draft, goes a little bit later, but it gives them some more opportunity. And then I think the other thing it does is it also provides competition. And Kyle had actually kind of said that a little offhandedly in their press conference on Saturday when all was said and done. And he said that some of the guys will provide competition for veterans and will make them better because now someone's breathing down their neck. And I think and this is not meant to be a Michigan reference, he just has me on the team, but I think for someone like Ronnie Bell, that could be really good for him. Someone who started the season, who looked like he had some real potential, like he might be a seventh round gem and really fell off there. And I think there'll be a lot of that. That receiver room, it's going to be very interesting. They've got a lot of bodies now. A lot of potential bodies, and who is going to make it? They had 6 on their roster last year when they did the 53. Then they had to put Ray McLeod on IR immediately, but it's going to be kind of interesting to see what happens in that receiver room. They signed Trent Taylor, which was, of course, a fan favorite, and everyone's really excited about that. I don't think when I look at the competition and who else is there, then Trent Taylor will end up making this team, but he could end up on the practice squad. So that's going to be kind of an interesting one to watch. And if people want to see what they're thinking for the next year or the next several months, seeing what happens with the 53, I think is going to be more telling than what happened in this draft, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you're right. And really, this is a player too that just the importance of being useful, right, to the NFL roster as a whole, like you have mentioned multiple times, like we've mentioned, just the special teams route for him, impressing and knowing how to do multiple jobs and responsibilities at any special teams and all three phases of special teams. Can he be useful in those fields? Team captain at Arizona, coached by a former NFL coach in Jed Fish. They ran an NFL like-minded type of offense. They were extremely successful. He had good production, tough football player, well-built, right? Kind of stocky built, strong, wired guy. He did a really good job too at the combine. He ran a 4.38, 36-inch vertical. Now these are things that great measurables. We'll see if that translates to the NFL football field and his route running, that kind of stuff too. But this is a player that I think, again, like you said, he's at worst going to be a great practice squad football player for him if they have to make a few tough decisions, if they can keep him through obviously that part of the of this offseason process, because the four spots at quarter. All right, you got Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, Ricky Pearsall, Juwan Jennings. All right, that's four right there. So
yep. So then it's those other two.
So what happens with those other two, how they play, who can be most useful in those last two positions, because those first four are most likely staying unless some sort of trade or something like that. So, to be versatile, to be useful on just the special teams aspect, I think is huge for Cowing. His experience as a leader, his experience with being coached by an NFL coach at Arizona is huge. And then his ability, obviously, to be fast and just another weapon again, in the preseason, I think will be awesome, and the good thing for him is Kyle does a lot of fun stuff for the young guys in the preseason. He doesn't really hold off and kind of keep, some of his really good plays for just, the first group or whatever. He calls a lot of his normal day-to-day stuff in those preseason games. So he'll be able to show off his skill set and probably in multiple positions too, from the outside and inside.
And I always tell people and think about Juwan Jennings, who was cut, who made the practice squad, and then look at him today. So getting on this practice squad, or any practice squad for that matter, is not a bad thing by any means. So it'll be interesting to kind of see how that plays out. I want to talk about the running back, Isaac Guerendo, before we move to the secondary. I think those are the top things I want to discuss on this particular podcast. But he's another fast guy. That's the other thing they added. They added some speed, because I think it does not look like Danny Gray is going to happen. And that was the last person where they tried to really add some speed. And it hasn't panned out, unfortunately, for Danny and for the 49ers. That's just sometimes that's the way the cookie crumbles. But they added some speed here. You have another guy that could be a potential returner in Guerendo. He said something in his Zoom with us that stood out to me, of course, is that he said, I'm also really good at catching the ball out of the backfield, which is very important for a running back in Kyle Shanahan's offense. Yeah. So I think this becomes a really good player. You have Elijah Mitchell going into the last year of his contract. He has been so good when he can be on the field, but he has just so unfortunately battled injury after injury, it's hard to see for a guy that's good and is actually a good guy, that too. But he's battled injury after injury. Jordan Mason has been able to come in, but they need a real backup for Christian McCaffrey. And I think that I'm not one of these people that's like, he can't do this many snaps. But at the end of the day, there does come a point, and he's now been playing football for a while. He's been in this offense for a couple of years. They do have to find some relief for him, because from week 1 to week 18 to whatever, we see how long these seasons are now, and they've got to give him, I feel like, some relief, and maybe Isaac Guerendo is that guy.
They absolutely have to. This is something that I think you and we had discussed multiple times throughout the season last year, of just that, running Christian McCaffrey into the ground, although it did get you to the Super Bowl and to an NFC championship 2 years basically running, right, with great success. Yes, what is the main objective here? And that is to keep one of your best football players on the field as much as possible. And I think last year we saw it multiple times where the dude is just literally exhausted on the sidelines. And everybody at home, everybody on that sideline knew that, like, all right, to get back in the game, we got to get this guy the ball again, right? Whether it's in the short passing game, whether it's in, just downhill running game. And I think what Grando does for them, 6 foot, 220 pounds, he brings a level of like physicality, right? And size in the backfield, which I think is big, which is kind of missing, I think, sometimes for San Francisco in their power running game. But then, like you said, 4'3" guy, 40+ inch vert, 10 broad. I mean, so this guy is explosive. He's been in an offense with Jeff Brom too over there in Louisville, where they really do utilize the running back in a very similar way, right? And demanding a lot of them in the run game and in the pass game. So I think this is a great fit for the player himself and for the team ultimately, of really alleviating that pressure from Christian McCaffrey and still having the threat of a home run hitter in the backfield when your star football player is on the sideline getting rest.
So let's switch to the secondary on my theme of planning for the future. The 49ers draft Malik Mustafa, a safety, in the 4th round. Talanoa Hufanga coming off an ACL injury and also going into his final year of his rookie contract. Right. And so this is the planning ahead part of it. And someone argued with me on Twitter, and they said, which I know that will probably shock everybody, but I chose this not to. I just don't engage. But basically, it was like, you're wrong. These guys can contribute now. I'm not saying they can't contribute now. I'm just saying they are planning for the future. They are drafting guys that can potentially replace people they may lose. Deommodore Lenoir's in the last year of his contract. Travarius Ward's in the last year of his contract. I mentioned Elijah Mitchell, Talanoa Hufanga. Their planning needs to be made. So Malik Mustafa is a guy that John Lynch said he's built like an Adonis, which I thought was just kind of funny coming out of John Lynch's mouth, but he is built like an Adonis. He's not wrong about that. He's very good. I think that he's got some real potential in this defense, and depending on how long it takes Hufanga to really be ready for the season, those ACL injuries are tough, and it happened later, and that is always a hard thing too. We may see him on the field. So anything about him that really stood out for you? Anything else?
That's right. Well, I mean, he's played in 35 games, been extremely productive in tackling, 175 total tackles, 15 tackles for loss, right? I think that is huge. 4 sacks, pass defended throughout his career, 20, and then, just 4 forced fumbles, the interceptions, he had a few, 2 fumble recoveries. What I think I'm seeing here when I look at this player, when I watch some of his highlights in preparation for this show, is I'm seeing a player that can be potentially used, a little bit of that Dan Quinn, Legion of Boom cover 3 type of style that Kyle has adopted from being with Dan Quinn in Atlanta, that this is a player that I can use a little bit as that safety, that box safety at the line of scrimmage, in coverage, in zone, right, to stop some of these more aggressive physical running teams that they play later on in the year, but also to be a guy that they can use, as the same way of like a smaller size linebacker to blitz, pressure the quarterback, and really just be a presence at the line of scrimmage with his size, his physicality, and his awareness for the football. So, this isn't a guy that I expect to play a ton of snaps at man coverage and lock down the other team's best tight end. No doubt there will be times where he'll be asked to do that. But I think big picture wise, we're seeing a big physical, strong presence in the secondary that can also be used inside the tackle box, right? To be a physical presence and to add speed again, like you were saying, right? For this defense, which I think at times was a big missing component to them, especially when Hufanga went out with his injury. So I think this is just another security blanket, like you're saying, where, they can make an impact now, building for the future too, depending on what happens with some of those other guys in the back end of that secondary, which was already in question last year.
Absolutely. And that was something, and moving to the cornerback position, this was something they addressed in free agency and addressed in round 2 of the draft. Free agency, they bring in Isaac Yodom, who they like a lot, who I think they think can really compete on the outside. If Lenoir's their best nickel corner and their best outside corner, he'll just move around. But I think in a perfect world, perhaps, that's not the case. They also sign Rock Ya-Sin, and then they take Renardo Green. And Renardo Green comes back to my theme of versatility. I mean, he told us he could play all three positions. I mean, he's like, I could be a safety, I could be a outside corner, I could be an inside corner. And Kyle said there wasn't so much tape on him being a nickel, but he could see it. He could see that it could happen. But this is a guy who I think also has some real potential. And again, in the planning for the future, this is not someone I expect to start this season, but he will compete, for one of these backup positions. You have obviously Charvarius Ward and Diamador Lenore, and as I mentioned, both going to the last years of their contract. Yeah. I think if I were to guess today, on April 29th. So a lot can happen between now and then. But if I were to guess today, your three starters, including outside insider, Lenore, Ward, and Isaac Yoda. However, we'll see how things play out. But I think this is a good pick for them. And I also think when we talk about attitude and kind of toughness, like his attitude, he was great. He kept saying, I'm a dog. John Lynch said, I think he told us 15 times in the phone call, like, you're getting a dog. One of his teammates who they drafted said, you're getting a dog. Like, it was, this is the theme, and that's like definitely a cornerback kind of attitude. But there was something about it that I was like, he's going to fit in so well in that room and in this defense. And I think that down the road, we are going to end up seeing him be one of their kind of secondary gems that they find. Yeah,
definitely. And this is, again, like just a crew and a group, a player grouping, right, in that secondary that was just really, I think, what led to their demise in the Super Bowl, right, is just being so stretched thin, right, in that part of the field. And that forced, I think, just defensive play calling to be adjusted in a way that maybe wasn't conducive to what their talent was really asking, right, to what the overall structure of the team was built. So I think adding this guy, right, Green, to this secondary, again, not a man cover guy, right? Mel Kiper said, don't see him as like a great man cover guy, but see him as a great zone defender, see him as a nice, big physical presence on the outside, plays the football well, did a good job breaking up passes, didn't record many interceptions. I want to say he only recorded maybe one interception.
One interception, but 13 PBUs. And John Lynch said he looks at PBUs even more than interceptions.
Yeah, and I would say I would say most NFL people would probably see that way as well, because that really is like the difference between being a great pro and a college football player is just the breakups at the point of attack. And the other aspect is he's been noted as a sure-handed tackler in the secondary. And I think that's something that the San Francisco 49ers valued a very, very highly compared to some other franchises too, especially in that position where, all right, he might not be the greatest man-to-man cover corner, but we know for a fact that he's going to get the guy down on the ground, right?
Well, that was an issue for them.
Right. Which was absolutely another issue too. So, I think just, again, the level of physicality with their first two picks, the mental, attitude of their first two picks, guys that have that chip on their shoulders, have that attitude, both sides want to play physical brand of football, football junkies in the sense that they want to learn more. They want to get better. They want to have a high football IQ. And I think he fits perfectly in what they want to get back to in San Francisco with their style of defense that they play. And
that defense, it was an issue all year long. And I know that we talked about it a lot. But the issues in the 3-game losing streak in the regular season were there the first 5 games of the season. They just were scoring more points. Yeah. And they were able to mask those issues. They got lucky with a couple of key turnovers during the second half of the season. And those issues almost cost them the Packers game and almost cost them the NFC Championship. And it's interesting because you even see like the Lions, I think what they did in their secondary, I've been like making the joke, but I think we're not letting a ladybug take the trip to the Super Bowl away from us again. Like they really made adjustments in their secondary because that was their Achilles heel. Right. And the 49ers were actually kind of just lucky that their Achilles heel was a little bit worse than theirs. There were a lot of things that went on there, obviously, in that second half of the NFC Championship. But there are a few things that lost in the Super Bowl. And I think that the secondary being stretched in, as you said, is one of them. And you had Logan Ryan in the Super Bowl in a position, and Logan Ryan was tremendous for them. I mean, he really was. He was tremendous for them in so many ways, and he's had an incredible career. But they literally signed him off a Disney cruise a month and a half earlier, and he was their best option at that position in the Super Bowl. So I think
demanding too much of a player, especially in that phase of his career, right? Demanding too much of him, and of course positions too that he really just never excelled at even when he was in his prime, and that's what was interesting too. So, Kyle and John, they're really going to focus on the fact that, like with anything, when you feel like you've maybe made mistakes or kind of cut corners in certain things, you're just like, well, never again. And I think right now that's kind of what they said with this draft. Never again are we going to feel like we are caught, by this thread, from being a Super Bowl team because we didn't really protect ourselves enough. So another insurance policy to this draft. Of course, everyone left the draft thinking that they did great. We love our draft picks. No one made a bad draft pick yet. Only time will tell. For right now, on paper, the San Francisco 49ers checked a lot of boxes and a lot of things that were concerning to them a year ago. They checked those boxes. We'll see if their coaching staff now, the scheme, they can really bring these players up to speed and make them, as useful as possible for this upcoming football season too. Because, I understand what the fans said to you too, because the whole, and we're planning for the future. Well, fans and football coaches and management, they can only see, today, and they hope for tomorrow. So, it's really
except
just
John said it. Except John flat out said it in his pre-draft press conference. He said, doubt. We're not just planning for this year, we're planning for beyond.
No doubt. No, and listen, he has to say that, right? Because that's just one of those lines that they give him in that book right before he goes in those meetings with you. Like, hey, say this. But still, the truth is that you can't keep coming up in second and third place every year.
No, you cannot.
And, despite all those successes, if they keep showing up in second and third place every year, John knows that, that will only get him so far. And there are very few GMs that get second opportunities to be GMs again, if any. I don't honestly, off the top of my head, I don't even know if there really are that many. So, and Kyle knows that too. Kyle is going to that point too in his career where, he is the new age Andy Reid. He's a superstar in the game. We know how great he is, and he just, can't quite get that one game, to really put that last feather in his cap that he is, almost earned, and he really, if there's someone deserving of it because of how much time and effort and how well he coaches, from my experience with him too, absolutely. But we all know that, deserving and earning is two different things here in this football world. And, football fans and the media are very unforgiving that way. So I think both these men know that they got to do a better job of just securing their own safety of their football team for now, for the future with this draft class. They did that. And you're right. They just played in the Super Bowl. They really didn't get much downtime at all. No vacations for them or their families. They earned that. And now they got to get back to it because the Eagles got better. I don't know if the Cowboys got better. I mean, some people say that they did. We'll see. I don't know about that. But, the Eagles got better for sure. That's a fact. And it looks like the Lions got better. That's a fact too. So those three teams in the NFC are kind of, battling for that top position, while the NFC North, I feel like as a whole, has improved dramatically. And honestly, even Sean McVay and the Rams, I think They did better. They got better this draft too. So it's an interesting time right now for the NFC. And I know Kyle and John, they know that they need to kind of continue to seize the moment with the group that they have before they really have to kind of rewrite, the story of their football team and its future.
And when I say plan for the future too, I don't mean like these guys are going to sit. They're obviously going to play. They play, they contribute now, and then they also, but that's the draft. But that is you nailed it there. Absolutely. The one thing I'm going to take a quick second to touch on is people were upset they didn't take a tackle. There really wasn't going to be anyone by the time that they picked that made sense for them. And I think the 49ers have a much more positive view of their offensive line than maybe the fans and the public have of their offensive line. They did bring in Dominic Pooney, a guard. It's Pooney, not Puny, even though I like the idea of a guy that big as a guard, last name being Puny. They signed, I think this is going to be kind of something to watch. They signed an undrafted free agent, Drake Nugent, out of Michigan, and I'm not just bringing it up for that, but they do. Jake Brendel was their center, and he was good. He was very, very good, but I could see there being competition there because he's now been in the league for quite some time. He also started as an undrafted free agent, but he's been in the league a while, and so it'll be interesting to kind of see if there is some competition at that position. But all in all, I think they got better. And now we're going to have rookie minicamp and OTAs and minicamp and training camp. And we're going to be talking about this ad nauseum until the season starts. And then we'll know for sure. And there'll be some guy in camp that everyone's obsessed with and loves, and the fans think is the future of the franchise, and will get cut and people will be upset. And that is just what's going to happen over the next several months, because this is how we do things. But in the meantime, I do think they got better. And you're right. Nobody had a bad draft. There is not a single team today that is like, boy, did we mess that up.
No doubt. And if they did, they're not admitting it. They're like, deny. And hey, the San Francisco 49ers, you're right. Pooney and Kingston, they're adding some guys that have played a ton of college football. They have size. Pooney has a really strong lower half of his body, which is always good, especially in that interior part of your offensive line.
And Nugent.
Yes, excuse me. So, that's where I think, but they draft Jared Kingston too as well in the 6th round too. The interior center guard.
Yes, they did. From
USC. So that was who I was mentioning.
They drafted 2 guards and then they signed the center. So I mean, I know they had other free agents too, but they did also draft Kingston. You are correct.
So the interior part of the offensive line, that being, again, adding depth, adding competition to that aspect of the room, and really just to remind everybody at home, the offensive line wasn't necessarily a weakness of this team a year ago. Now, the way that it's designed, it's not meant to be just like this bruising, big, strong, physical O-line like the Baltimore Ravens, because their offensive coordinator, Kyle Shanahan, doesn't value that type of football player and the offensive line, right? So it's a little bit of a different structure. And, honestly, Chris Jones is just honest. He's one of the best players to ever do it in the interior line. And the 3 plays that mattered most, he won those 3 battles, and it wasn't like he beat one guy. He beat really the double team or the conglomerate of the concept, and just really was a superstar, and really probably, I don't know, a hair away from being potentially an MVP candidate in the Super Bowl, right? If it was possible to give it to anyone other than a receiver or a quarterback in this day and age. But, that's how impactful he was. That's how close they were. And, we'll overanalyze when you fall short that way. But just they're adding that competition in the interior part of the line. That's an important aspect too. And like I said earlier, checking every box that they needed to secure, right? Just making sure that they have the amount of players needed at some of the most important pieces that I feel like were thin throughout the football season for them.
100%. And I think they would think that Chris Jones doesn't have that opportunity if there isn't a major blunder on special teams and if the secondary isn't.
Oh my God. Yeah. God.
And I think for them, they value. Yeah. God. That's why special teams.
I totally forget about that play. Oh my God.
I mean, to me, that's the game right there. As far as I'm concerned, that's the game. And I turned to my colleague next to me at the time in the press box, and I said, that is the ball game right there. No matter what else happens, that's the game. And that
really
and they addressed it. And that is why punt returner also became such a priority. Right. So I think that's something but they really, and I don't think they didn't have an overreaction. They looked at where they needed to, and they fixed what they felt needed to be fixed. And the other thing is tackles don't grow on trees, and your best tackles are going to be there at 31. So address the areas that you can address that make you better, and that were ultimately the reason you lost the Super Bowl.
And not every tackle fits, again, what Kyle and them want to do. And the quick style passing, the formations, all that kind of stuff, the quick hitting throws, they don't need somebody that is really like that on the edge for their offensive line that way. He's going to try to win with the mental prowess of how he dissects defenses, his quarterback thinking and making quick decisions decisively throughout the football game, and then allowing his football players, his great skill group, to just tear up the back end, right, of those defenses. And then when they get worn out trying to stop that stuff, that's where they lean on you in the run game. And that's where they win with some of their more simplistic running style football games, because there's just so much stuff that kind of overwhelms you. So the strategy of the team is still intact, and what they have been doing and building is still going to be, viable for them to continue to make a run here for this season again.
Matt, thank you so much for your time and your analysis today and putting up with my Michigan takes. I appreciate you.
Yes, no more.
Well, there's like a million new of them in the NFL. That's like not going to be possible.
I know.
There's like so many.
But it was cool though to see Michigan and Washington, just the amount of football players that went into the draft from pretty much every position group on the field too. So just, shout out to both of those programs for developing those young men and really just giving college football a great product, because they're going to be some really good football players at the next level here representing the Shield. So good times for the NFL for sure.
It's going to be fun to watch. Matt, let everyone know where they can find you.
So Sims Complete on Instagram and Twitter, and then Sims Complete on YouTube. And you can also find us here with the Believe Network. We're a part of the Believe Network family along here with Tracy. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And as always, just an honor to be here talking football with you guys. And thank you again for having me.
Absolutely. You guys can find me on Twitter at Tracy FGSN, on Instagram at Tracy Sandler. We are brought to you by Bet Online. If you like what you heard, and I know you did, please make sure to give us a 5-star rating and leave a super positive review. And with that, I'll talk to everybody next time. Bye, all. Go Blue.
Go Blue.